All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Dubuque Area Chamber of Commerce's annual legislative kickoff. I first want to start off by thanking all of our ultimate sponsors. They're what makes all of what we do possible. And so Q Casino, Medical Associates Plans and Clinics, TH Media, and Midwest One Bank. Our ultimate sponsors really are what help drive the chamber mission forward. And so their support is what helps make this happen. So with that, in addition, I want to thank all of our legislators that are here today. Representative Chuck Eisenhart, Representative Lindsey James, Representative Shannon Lundgren, Senator Kerry Kolker, and Senator Pam Yoakum. In addition, I just want to note that Senator Bradley did want to be here today, but he is a practicing dentist and had patients to tend to this morning, and so I think we can all respect that and appreciate that. And on top of that, Representative Lundgren has graciously agreed to be here at the beginning of the forum, but had a prior commitment when we reached out, and so she will be leaving halfway through. So just wanted to let everyone know that beforehand. Now, as we are already at 8:30, we're going to move right into the questions from the chamber, and then we will start collecting questions from the audience. So if you are in the audience, please use the chat function, send your questions in there, and we will take time at the end to read any and all questions that we have received. But with that, I'm happy to hand it over to Rob Reinert from Northwestern Mutual. Rob's also on the Chamber's Executive Committee, where he serves as Diversity Chair.
Good. Well, thanks, Ryan, and good morning, everyone. As mentioned, we're going to begin today by asking a few questions to our legislators relating directly to the Chamber's overall priorities. We'll then open things up to audience questions. It looks like we have quite a crowd, so we'll try to leave much time as possible for your questions at the end. To submit a question, as Ryan has mentioned, please type it in the chat question function or virtually raise your hand. First off, we'll be discussing something top of mind for everyone here, COVID-19. The pandemic has had an inestimable impact on the business community over the past year, and businesses continue to struggle into 2021. The state has great power and resources to bring to bear, so we'll touch briefly on a few areas where the legislature may play a role. As you have seen this past year, from coronavirus to derecho and snow squalls, economically painful disasters seem to be happening more and more often. Would you support a proposal to create an emergency economic fund for the largest such disasters, meant to help businesses weather the storm? And are there any plans to replicate the federal relief package at the state level?
Well, I will actually start because one of my calls after this meeting, or one of my obligations, is a relief package that I'm working on with the Iowa Restaurant Association. I am the new chair of our Commerce Committee, and I'm very excited about taking on that role for the fact that I ran on assisting small businesses as a small business owner myself. And so although I chaired human resources for the last couple of years, and I'm still very passionate about the things we've done there and will continue to serve, I think going into 2021 and knowing what we've been through the pandemic, we have some great opportunities to help spur and grow Iowa's economy. And so I can tell you that there are many factors, many bills that are being worked on in the House to address different sectors of business. Specifically right now, like I said, we're working on one that will help offer relief to bars and restaurants in our state here in Iowa, and looking at how we're going to fund that. So I imagine that there will be many other opportunities and many other, like I mentioned, bills that are being worked on in other sectors, because we know, our chambers and our convention and visitors bureaus and our tourism industry, we have so many sectors that have been adversely affected by COVID-19 that we can't just look at it at one sector and feel like we're going to just save them. I think the reason I'm involved in the restaurant and hospitality side of it is because I am a restaurant owner, and so lots of questions have come my way, and that's why we're going to focus on that. And I'm sure Carrie can touch base on what she's working on for the rest of our tourism and hospitality industry as well. But I can assure you that there are things being worked on, and I Would imagine that these items will be very bipartisan because we all have these industries within our communities that we represent. So that's what I can tell you, that we are working on commerce right now.
Excellent.
I can step up next if that's okay.
Sure.
Let's see, I actually served on a vein of the governor's recovery task force. So for those of you that aren't aware, the governor had a recovery task force that's been meeting since March, and in all different facets of every industry. And so what they've done is they met individually as industries, and then they put together a plan through IEDA, and then IEDA presented that to the governor. So I'm very interested. I have not seen what the governor's pick and chosen or how she's going to digest that plan that's been submitted by professionals in every facet of every industry. But in regards to, I served on the hospitality and tourism task force there, and we put together a pretty good plan that I'm hoping some good nuggets of that come and rise to the top. As we all know, every industry has been impacted by COVID. It's unfortunate. My specific industry, of course, I see the hemorrhaging, and I talk to those people every day. The restaurants that are closing, hotel motel tax, the hotels that are trying to bear their doors to keep open because nobody's staying and traveling, meetings and conventions aren't happening. So we're really trying to get a grasp on that as a tourism industry as well. I'm anxious to see how this federal relief package pans out and spreads out because we have, what, $900 million. So I'm anxious to see how that's going to be divvied up. And I think we should look at that first before we start jumping into state reserves so we can utilize the federal money. Obviously, when we use federal money and we start filling those holes, the federal money eventually goes away, and then the expectations are there. The state's going to back that up. So I think we have to really be careful and look at that long term as well as short term, because we need to get Iowa back open and running. Thank you.
Anybody else like to jump in?
I think I will. So I think part of your question, Rob, was whether or not we would support some kind of permanent program for small businesses in times of disasters like the coronavirus and the derecho and other natural disasters that we witnessed this last year. Last year has been a disaster on many fronts. Anyway, yes, I actually think that would be a good idea. For one thing, it would set up a fund where when a disaster happens, it's ready to go. We have something ready to go. It's been vetted. We know how to get the money out quickly. And if anything, we should have learned from this coronavirus pandemic is that we weren't ready. There wasn't a good plan. And we still have about $47 million left out of the $1.25 billion that the state did receive and that the governor has spent, but there's $47 million left. So certainly the legislature needs to provide some oversight. There has been some questions about how the governor spent some of that $1.25 billion. And yes, the legislature needs to be more involved in how that money is going to be spent. As Carrie said, we are still waiting to figure out how much money and how that will be divvied up in this new stimulus package that was just enacted a couple weeks ago by Congress. So, the short answer is yes. I think setting up some kind of a permanent disaster fund to help small businesses is a good idea.
I would point out that we do have a state disaster assistance fund for individuals, homeowners, when disaster strikes that we see during times of like the derecho and flooding. So yeah, I see no reason why we couldn't have a standing program ready to roll out at the governor's direction with the legislative council support in times of disaster. And some other states have been doing some really novel things in response to this, and I think it would pay for us to look at some of those examples as we set that up.
Thanks, Chuck.
And
Lindsay?
just to throw my 2 cents in here, yes, certainly, I think that's a great idea to look at going forward. I think that what we realize after this global pandemic is that we're all deeply interconnected. All of these systems are interconnected. When our people are unhealthy, our economy is not healthy. When our economy is not healthy, our people are not healthy. And that we all need to be making sure that all parts of our state are thriving, urban, rural. We're in this together. So that's, I think, one of the, big learning curves here for us in Iowa. I do want to just draw our attention to the fact that our economy is not going to recover until we can move through this pandemic. We have to make sure that we are mitigating the spread of this pandemic. Again, we are, in terms of when you look at all of the states, Iowa ranks as the 5th worst state for COVID mitigation spread. And so if we don't take seriously COVID and mitigating the spread of COVID, we're not going to recover. So people want to be out in our businesses until people feel safe to be able to be out in the economy again, then we're going to struggle. And so I think that certainly we need these kinds of programs to help in the interim, and then we need to take seriously the pandemic that is in front of us.
Good, thank you. We're going to move to workforce and development, talent attraction. Invest in Iowa was one of Governor's top priorities last session, and we expect it to remain top of mind in 2021. With provisions lowering property taxes, supporting child care and mental health services, and growing the pool of resources for recreational projects, the Chamber sees much potential in this program. However, there's been hesitance from both sides of the aisles to raise taxes by 1% for various reasons. Do you expect Invest in Iowa to move forward this session, or is there still further work ahead? Let's take a stab at that one.
Observations. A big that relates to the Iowa Water and Land and Legacy Fund for outdoor recreation and natural resources, which has obviously been a focus of mine over the years. I don't know if we're going to see the same package rolled out as we did last year. We aren't being made privy to what the governor has in store. We have been asked for our opinion. From sitting in on some of the other forums that other legislators have been having around the state, one of the things that I've been able to do using Zoom is kind of be a fly on the wall at some of those other forums. And I've concluded that there seems to be not a lot of conversation between legislative Republicans and the governor on whether a package should come forward or what it might look like. That does not bode well, I don't think. And the resistance to some of the ideas we saw last year tells me that that a package won't be received with open arms. Let me just put it that way by many people. I think a lot of folks we have our arms folded when it comes to prove to me that this is the best way to go, and I don't see a whole lot of effort on anybody to try to bring the votes together to make it happen.
I'll just state, I've had some of these conversations in some of the forums that we've done, Senator Kelker and I, on the western part of the state. I think what the governor introduced last year is a starting point. This is not the first time this conversation has happened in the House chamber. Representative Louis Zumba 4 years ago mentioned this program and said, how can we use a sales tax increase to fund IWIL and also fund mental health? And then 4 years later, we see something come from the governor's office. So I think every idea is a starting point, and we're going to continue to have those conversations. As you all know, I'm passionate about making sure that we fund our brain health. I worked a lot on legislation that it really instituted some significant changes to both our adult and children's mental health programs in the state. And so, it is very imperative that we find ways to fund this. And I do find it interesting when Representative Eisenhart says that, arms are folded, but I'm not hearing any ideas come from Representative Eisenhart either. And so I am perfectly happy to listen to ideas from the minority party on how we get to fund mental health and how we fund IWIL. I know that's important, and you're passionate about that, Chuck. So I think that the conversations don't need to start with the governor's office on the floor. And maybe we need to start working together a little bit better and having those conversations.
I will say that I was in Des Moines Monday at some leadership meetings, and workforce, quality of life, they all rise up and bubble to the top. There's no secret there, but then I think this funding mechanism is such a large beast. Everyone's trying to get their hands around it. What the governor thinks it's going to look like, what the legislator thinks it's going to look like. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to have to be an agreement and a bipartisan agreement. I'm going to have a lot of bipartisan support before that would get up for a vote.
I agree. That's the way it would happen if it will happen. And I would just observe that Representative James and I were both on the Ways and Means Subcommittee for this bill last year. We had no subcommittee meetings on it. There were no opportunities to put different ideas out on the table. And while I can't speak for Representative James, I can tell you I was not approached privately by anyone looking for support or ideas from me, or even to gauge the level of support among House Democrats for Invest in Iowa or a version thereof.
Too. Or Senator Yoakum, I see that your light just flashed on. Did you want to chime in? Okay, I'll just say this. There certainly were flaws in the Invest in Iowa legislation last year. I don't have a crystal ball as to whether or not. I mean, Carrie makes a very good point about, you know, it's a large funding mechanism. It's complicated, and there are a lot of people who need to chime in to shape it. And so I don't have the crystal ball to answer that specifically. Will it go, Rob? I don't know, but there were certainly flaws in it before. I think you all know me. You know, I am passionate about making sure that people who are poor and pushed aside and on the margins of societies are their voices are being heard. One of the problems with a regressive tax is that you end up putting a big tax hike on people who are poor. So you all know this. We're all thinking adults on this call. You know, a sales tax, when you have very little income, disposable income, you're making it paycheck to paycheck, as a lot of people are here in Dubuque and in the state of Iowa. You get taxed on your money coming in, and then when you put it out, when you purchase things, you get taxed on your money going out. And so it's a disproportionate weight on people who are poor and people who are struggling. I know I talked about COVID already and the economy, that we are deeply interconnected. And so, you know, we have to be having these fearless conversations, you know, especially our business communities, our community leaders. You all are community leaders, how we're making sure that every single person is thriving, and that we're not putting unnecessary weight on people who already have a real rough time of life.
So there's not a whole lot more I can add, because I think Carrie and Shannon probably have a better handle on how likely it is that legislation will move forward and in what form. Certainly, I have always supported I thought it was a good idea, something that the voters enacted or passed back already in 2010. But the package that we saw had a lot of problems, obviously, or it would have passed last year. And when you try and put a package together that increases taxes over on this side, and that, as Lindsay has pointed out, impacts is a regressive tax. Sales tax is a regressive tax and has a much bigger impact on people at the lower end of the economic ladder. And then on the other hand, the other part of the package gave tax breaks to another set of income earners in Iowa. And quite frankly, that other side was people who are doing quite well. So that was part of the tax mix. It's certainly, we've been struggling to find the money for mental health services, and critically important. The derecho and this pandemic and all the rest of it that people have gone through this year have demonstrated how important mental health services are. In fact, one of the very first bills I ever introduced when I became a legislator was mental health parity. And yet to this day, we do not have really mental health parity yet. We're more, whether private and public sector are responsible for brain health services. Most of those responsibilities are still falling on the public sector. So yes, we need to figure out a way to fund it. I don't know if this is the best opportunity, but we'll see what's introduced and what unfolds in the coming few months of this next session. And I hope we can work together, because there's some really, really important issues and problems that we need to solve this year. Thanks for the question.
Very good. Thanks for your responses there. We're going to move to economic development. This has been a question that seems to come up every year. Tax reform and economic development go hand in hand, and we applaud the efforts of the legislator to reduce the tax burden on businesses in previous sessions. However, Iowa continues to be ranked low on the Tax Foundation rankings for business tax climate, number 40 in 2021. Additionally, in the past, the legislature has considered reducing some economic development incentives in the process of reducing taxes, something the Chamber strongly opposes. There's two parts to this question. First, how do you see the conversation around tax reform and economic development incentives playing out over the course of this session? And do you support maintaining the historic preservation credit, high quality jobs credit, and other important incentives for Iowa businesses?
Since I do have to check out here in a minute, I will just state that, you know, any tax credits that we develop that are going to help grow small businesses in the state of Iowa, I'm completely supportive of. I think we've got a broken tax system, period, both nationally and in the state of Iowa. So these tax credits basically help fix some of those loopholes or give people an advantage that maybe they wouldn't have based on the tax system that we're working with. What I'd love to see is an overhaul of the tax system, both nationally and in the state of Iowa, and do away with tax credits because we do the right thing by how our tax system runs. Unfortunately, I don't see that happening anytime in the near future. I know it's a big beast to wrap your arms around. In the past, I've always been, you know, supportive of the historic tax credit. I'll continue to do that. Luckily for us here in our part of the state, both in the city of Dubuque and outside of the city of Dubuque in Dyersville, which Carrie and I represent, they've used those tax credits in magnificent ways that have done great things for our communities. And quite honestly, the only way we're going to grow our small rural communities is to allow them to use some of these advantages in tax credits in order to grow their community and make it a place worth living. So I am very supportive, and I'll continue to be supportive. And I am sorry that I do have to jump off here, everyone, but I want to really work on you know, these bills that will hopefully put some money into our small business owners' pockets. And I wish y'all a happy new year, and all of the legislators, I'll see you next week.
Bye, Shannon.
Thanks, Shannon. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
On this question, Senator Yoakum and I have been both on the Ways and Means committees for many years. And I think if we step back a step and look at a bigger picture, we can maybe think about this in a little different way. And that is, as a legislature, we have two different ways of establishing our priorities in terms of how we spend taxpayer money and other resources. One is our budget, which is approaching $8 billion a year in a general fund at the state. The other is through our tax expenditure program, money that would normally be due to us, but we choose not to collect it because we want to incentivize certain type of economic behavior. The major difference between these priorities is that the appropriated funds get reviewed every year, and that in times of distress like we have now, and revenues are reduced, that is where we look first in terms of how do we pay for the essential services of state government. The tax expenditures rarely, if ever, go through a systematic review in terms of, are they achieving the goals intended, and in times of distress, are there areas that we need to look at. We had a program, tax expenditure review committee that we put in place, I think about 6 years ago now, that was intended over a 5-year time period to look at every program. That group has met. I don't recall that group has ever produced a recommendation out of that. And that group, to my knowledge, did not meet at all this year. And so that is the struggle we look at in terms of globally and individually. How do we assess the relative merits of these programs and demonstrate to ourselves, because we have a legislature that's a little bit different every year, that these programs merit continuation and perhaps even an additional investment, because there are many good programs, but it's difficult for us in terms of proving to the public where it is we should focus our attention from year to year. That's where I would like to spend my time and efforts going forward. And I got the new appointment this year to the Government Oversight Committee, so perhaps that's one place that we can take a look.
Very good.
I'll just add that the tax credits and backfill take up about 6% of our state budget. And so as good stewards of all of our taxpayers, I think it's good to evaluate every program that we have. I see firsthand how the historic tax credits work, obviously being in my industry, downtown Dyersville, and just the tourism industry in rural Iowa. And they've been very successful. And right now, if you drive around rural Iowa, they're struggling. So those are significant to large and small communities as well. So that's one that is one of my favorite ones that are near and dearest to my heart. In regards to tax reform, I think that is something that hopefully is talked about, because we're very high in corporate taxes and we're very high in income taxes. And I do know, I've never seen the tax plan that everybody's referring to, but they're supposedly they are looking at this tax plan. And so I don't serve on Ways and Means, but I'm anxious to see what this looks like. Thank you.
Lindsay or Pam? Say, Pam, I believe you might be muted.
If you muted yourself, Pam,
Pam?
zero way audio here.
I see that she is actually unmuted.
I'm looking into this right now. I think she must have self-muted herself, so I'm sending her a request to see if we can get her back. Lindsay, if you want to jump in while we try to work on Pam's audio.
You know, the irony is that probably what Pam was saying was just brilliant and would have solved all
I
of our
know.
Pam, are you muted still? Can you hear us?
I don't think so, am I?
Oh, I hear you.
Okay,
I don't know. Couldn't hear the rest of you earlier because all of a sudden it froze. So I don't know. Okay, so what I was trying to say is that I certainly support a more competitive and transparent tax system. It's not what we have right now. And to dovetail on what Chuck was saying earlier, we do not review all those tax credits, corporate tax credits. We set aside almost $500 million a year. And I know 3 years ago, the governor in her condition of the state had said that she was going to assign the lieutenant governor to head up a committee that was going to meet during the interim to start reviewing those tax credits. Well, it didn't happen. And nor did the tax expenditure committee meet during the interim this year among us legislators. Each year we try to review 5 different tax credits to see if we're actually as a state getting a good return on the investment. Like all the business people on this Zoom today or this go-to meeting today, you always look at return on investment. What are we investing and are we getting a good return on it? Well, that is no different than what we need to be doing as a state legislature. We are also running a business in many ways. And we need to make sure that when we put all these credits in place, that we're getting a good return. Some of them are great ideas. As it's been mentioned, historic preservation tax credits have worked really well for us. On the other hand, Iowa and the country pretty much still has a tax system that's based on a 20th century economy. We are now in a whole different economy. And I think we need to meet and we need to definitely start pulling apart that tax code and reforming it to actually meet the needs of a 21st century economy. People, quite frankly, I remember as a kid, people were earning more money at the Dubuque packing company than what they're earning today at a meat packing company in this state. So something has really changed, and in some ways not for the better, but we definitely need to start looking at a tax code that reflects today's economy. I'm done. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Lindsay, did you have anything?
It was brilliant, right? I was right.
Yeah.
I was right on. Competitive and transparent were the 2 words that Senator Yoakum used, which I will just, say again loudly: competitive and transparent. And, certainly a robust review, which does not happen. And you as business leaders take a look at your businesses and your operations, and you review and you crunch numbers and you forecast. Push on the majority party to do the same when it comes to our tax systems here in Iowa. So we could utilize your voice and your help in actually doing that. I do sit on the Ways and Means Committee. I also have a new appointment this session on economic growth. And so I hear at the top of the call, we had about 60 business leaders on this call. So this is what I'm asking you. Once COVID is over, I love coffee. In fact, here's my University of Dubuque coffee mug. I would love to sit down with you, 60 coffees over the course of the summer. And I would love to learn from you about what you think we need in terms of economic growth here in Iowa and a tax system, and what you need as business leaders. So I welcome that opportunity, and I look forward to it. So please be my excuse to have a cup of coffee.
All right. Thank you for your answers there. Lastly, we're going to cover air service. As we've all seen by now, the Dubuque Regional Airport resumed service to Chicago O'Hare just yesterday. This wouldn't have been possible without the help of our federal partners. We want to thank them, Senator Grassley, Senator Ernst, and Congresswoman Finkenauer, for their hard work on this issue. However, the reduction in flights over the early fall and the pandemic overall have led to reduced facility fees and therefore less funds available for maintenance and upkeep. At the same time, the Chamber is working with the airport to grow the flight offerings and business opportunities at Dubuque. Do you see additional funding flowing to airports this session to ensure Iowa airports remain competitive and can grow in this area?
Short answer is yes. We'll do our best. What I know is the federal COVID deal had about $2 billion for the nation's airports, but most of that money went to the large commercial airport hubs. But there was an appropriation for smaller commercial airports. I'm not sure, maybe Carrie knows, in your meetings with your leadership, on a breakdown of this latest stimulus package that was just approved, if there was money in that for airports, smaller airports that we see in Iowa. So I understand the fee schedule needs to be looked at. It has been changed in a long time, and I think we're willing to look at it. I mean, why not? We should be looking at it. Some of those fees haven't been changed in many, many years. So yes, we need to be looking at that. We need a healthy, robust transportation system in this state, and that includes air. So yes, we'll do our best. I don't know what else to say right now.
For me, who knows how long our COVID vaccination program will take. I'd be interested in hearing from Carrie what she thinks, what her crystal ball says about return to health of the tourism industry. But I think a big wild card here is, what will we see in terms of increased travel going forward? I think you've seen some major changes in how people do business in life, and it's an open question to me what kind of demand there will be for air travel going forward. I'm used to going to 2 or 3 national conferences every year. Many of those groups have now pivoted to being able to do online. It's not optimum, but it's still an open question for me, what role that will play. And frankly, I believe that needs to become a clearer picture before you see a lot of increased investment in any type of transportation infrastructure, for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I will just speak up and say that I haven't seen any glorious packages or anything like that in regards to where this money is going to be divvied out. And I'm anxious to see that. But obviously air service, we all know the pandemic's had a lot, but it has been severely impacting that industry as well. And sometimes I think that gets hidden a little bit. So obviously we need air service in Iowa for commerce as well. We need, good transportation on our highways, our air. But it is a big part of the tourism hospitality industry. People travel to national conventions, and Iowa wants to be known for that. We've got a lot of good airports that have direct flights to get people in and out for meeting delegates. I don't foresee that happening real quickly, though. I notice people are going from virtual meetings to now hybrid meetings to hopefully we can get back up to that next step. But people do travel differently. People are enjoying the outdoors more. I guess that's the only good thing that I can see that's came out of this pandemic, is people are getting out and they're walking the trails and buying kayaks and biking and using our bike trails. But that, once again, that air service, that has been severely impacted. And I wish I could have my crystal ball out and say, come April 1st, everyone's going to be flying again. But I don't foresee that happening anytime soon.
Very good. Lindsay, any comments?
Again, I think just want to affirm the fact that this industry has taken a huge hit, and we need to be thinking very critically about that. Certainly hope that the more funding and bigger federal packages can, you know, address some of the pain that this industry is hurting. But certainly I support our airport, expansion of our airport, and trying to figure out how to make that happen. So absolutely.
Very good. Well, I personally want to thank you all for your thorough and thoughtful answers this morning. This concludes the Chamber's questions, and we'd like to now open it up for the audience participation. Ryan will be taking over and reading member questions from the chat that have already been submitted, but also as a reminder, please submit your questions if you haven't already done so there. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Rob. So the first audience question that we have, I believe this is from another elected official. Thank you for this service in this very challenging time. Can the legislature advocate for more, sorry, 1 second, there we go. Advocate for more transparency in the COVID-19 vaccine planning and in acquiring vaccine in a more timely manner. We are awaiting vaccine to administer to our citizens. Thanks.
Well, I don't disagree with the question and what they want us to do. I agree. And I think one of the first questions is I believe the legislature needs to be providing more oversight over the entire COVID pandemic funding and the policies that have been put in place. I know Dubuque is short on the number of vaccines it needs just to get the first tier of people vaccinated and to get it timely. So I'm hoping that once President Biden is inaugurated, quite frankly, he does have a plan to help the states. And I hope that that means we're going to see an expedited system to get the vaccine out to the states and an expedited national system on getting that vaccine in the arms of people.
Right. That's great. That's great. Any other thoughts from anyone here?
I think we will see a change here in a couple of weeks because there's more of a resolve at the national level to provide guidance and assistance to states. Over the last 9 months, states and counties have been really left on their own to figure this out and make it up as we go along, so to speak. And that reflects, I think, a woeful lack of investment and planning and preparation in our public health system. And you can't pivot in the middle of a pandemic, but I think that's another area that will deserve a lot of oversight and reflection because I don't think this will be the last public health crisis that we face. And as we've seen, it has dire economic consequences for specific job sectors and peoples in particular. So we owe it to start looking quickly into how we're managing this one because it will inform how we organize and invest to prepare for the next one.
I would agree. We need to get all these vaccines into the arms of many as people that need them and want them, and hopefully that process can be enabled soon.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Next question. Can you provide any thoughts on what we might expect in regard to education funding this year?
Carrie, you want to start?
And pitch it over to somebody else. Well, I think education is going to be a hot topic this year. If I had to get my crystal ball out and tell you that, because this pandemic hopefully has opened a lot of eyes or hurdles and struggles and strifes that we've had with educating all Iowa children. And unfortunately, we've had some good actors and we've had some bad actors. And I hate for one bad actor, one public school district in Des Moines to affect all the good actors in Iowa, but I do know that there's probably going to be some penalties there for what they have had to do and make decisions on their own and ignore the state policies that were set forward. So I think we need to make sure that we are voices saying just because there's one bad actor doesn't mean that all these schools need to be penalized for that. And I don't foresee that happening. But virtual education, I mean, we need to make sure that, unfortunately, this pandemic, we need to make sure that every kid is somehow being able to be educated in Iowa. I notice enrollment's down. I'm hearing that enrollment's down in numbers. So are those kids going back to school? Or are they staying home? Or what's their parents' plan? I wish every child had a parent that sat there and watched them monitor homework, or every child had internet, but let's face it, that's not the case at all. So we need to make sure that all of those children are being taken care of and have the tools that they can utilize to get a good education in Iowa, because we're known for our education system.
Clearly, we need to invest in education as a state. Regardless of which political party was in the governor's office or running the legislature, education in the past was always the #1 priority. Everyone in this state believed that educating our children and making sure that we had a lifelong education quality learning system was in place and funded. And quite frankly, we have dropped the ball in the last 10 years on education funding. And we need to do a lot more than what we're doing. This pandemic has clearly shown us what the importance of broadband, the digital divide, and how it is playing out among rich, poor. Not good. So we have a lot of work to do. What I will say is that on one hand, we say Iowans are going to make the right decision. We're not going to mandate masks. And on the other hand, we say, nope, we can't let school boards and superintendents decide how best to reopen the schools based on their knowledge of the virus activity in their community. To me, that's just contradictory. And I think that we should have allowed local control in this during these last few months to let our superintendents and our school boards, who are also elected by the same people we are, make the decision on how best to reopen their schools and teach the children. So that's my frustration with what's happened in the last few months with our education system, but we've underfunded it for a long time.
So, and I would have to just echo some of the chamber's priorities has been education and education funding. And I think that part of recruiting and retaining families in the state of Iowa is going to have to do, it's going to hinge on educational opportunities for our kids, safe and affordable childcare, brain health. There are so many things that when it comes to quality of life that we need to invest in order to actually, continue to make sure that our business economy thrives. So I do feel very concerned as someone who has sat on the education committee that our schools are grossly underfunded. And I do believe that if you have honest conversations with superintendents and teachers and paraprofessionals, they have been heroic in educating our kids with very limited resources. And so I think that is an important piece of the conversation. Talk to your local entities about this. And then, let's continue to push funding in that direction. I do feel very concerned about, kind of the chatter around school vouchers. Let's be very clear that school vouchers will harm our rural schools, threaten to close rural schools. So we have to make sure that we have robust funding in the public schools for all parts of our state, especially because we do see the challenges that rural Iowa faces. So I want to say this just for the public. Thank you for all the educators and the healthcare workers and all the frontline workers who have been out in this pandemic, facing realities that are extremely painful and difficult. And you are all heroes in my mind.
Can I just add one thing? We have a pie, the budget, and 60% of that budget goes to education. And we've got the highest enrollment on Medicaid. So at the end of the day, every industry needs additional money. I'm excited because we have a superintendent that's coming into the Iowa Senate, just got elected. And I think he's going to be a good voice on how those funds are handled firsthand. And we've also got a past school board president. So I think we've got some good voices in the Senate that can hopefully help us weigh through the pros and cons of all that. And I do think those children that weren't able to go back to school, for example, in the Des Moines Public School District, they weren't allowed to open enroll. A lot of them wanted to get their kids into the schools or get them back into education. They were not allowed to go outside of their barriers. So I do think that there's a lot of gray areas and black and white areas that, unfortunately, this COVID situation has opened our eyes to we all know broadband needs to happen. And this is obviously the switch that needs to make sure that that lights up on the light bulb. But there's a lot of other circumstances, I think, too, that we're going to have to delve into on the education committee.
I think it's important for us to recognize that this pandemic has thrown a curveball at all of us and created a lot of clusters that we've tried to manage our way through. And I hope as we figure out how to move forward, we're not too harsh on each other, in terms of assessing how we've all tried to handle it, because lives have been at stake. I think long-term, we need to think very clearly about the connection of our education system to our economic system. And we need to make sure that people understand that there are rewards for education, and therefore investing in education is valuable. And that means, having our students emerge into good paying jobs and communities with high quality of life opportunities. And so we need to focus on both ends of those issues. And I think we can come up with some integrated solutions for how to finance education based on that.
Excellent. So I think we have time for probably one or two more questions. So this one, I'm sure you've gotten this question a few times before. Where does everyone stand on legalized recreational pot and why? Anyone? No.
If I had to get my crystal ball out, I don't see that going anywhere in the next few years anytime soon. I'll just add that.
We're still trying to figure out medical marijuana in Iowa.
I think we've seen.
I do know that there's been chatter more about decriminalizing small amounts of marijuana. And we actually did have a decriminalization law in Iowa back in the 70s and 80s when they redid the criminal code. Basically, a lot of people got mixed up that decriminalizing meant it was legal, and it wasn't. What it meant is if you had less than a certain amount in your possession, you weren't going to go to jail or prison for it. You might get a fine, but you weren't going to go to jail or prison. So anyway, if there would be any movement in that direction, I think I would probably first resolve medical marijuana and then move to maybe decriminalizing a certain amount before it would ever move into a full-blown legalizing. On the other hand, our surrounding states have done it. So I'm sure law enforcement is struggling big time on trying to figure out how to enforce Iowa's laws when it's so different from our surrounding states. So to hear from our law enforcement would be helpful.
Yeah, I agree with Senator Yoakum. I think with what we've seen in other states, though, that the public opinion can change on a dime. I mean, I think there's some states that have moved on this that we might not have expected to. I don't know that anybody on this call has made a thorough assessment, made it a priority in terms of our thinking to arrive at a position on that. I think the issues that will be driving it, I think the trends that will be driving it are what's happening in surrounding states that's impacting the behaviors of Iowans, and also the economics of it. If you take out the moral issue or the health issue, it's become like an economic driver for some states. But I also think, moreover, that the criminal justice implications of this issue are going to be looked at thoroughly and may end up driving some of the decisions we make, because there does seem to be a very serious imbalance in terms of who and how those our drug laws are being enforced. And I think that has come out and will continue to be part of the larger criminal justice reform discussions that we have had, and that I believe will accelerate those discussions in the months and years ahead.
Yeah, and just to chime in briefly, we have a long way to go in the state of Iowa. 12 other states around the country have moved to legalizing some of them as our neighbors. Here in the state of Iowa, we can't really talk about CBD oil without major controversy and conflict and problems. And so I think that it's going to take the public to chime in and really push these conversations on a state level in order for us to even begin to unpack some of this. And certainly I think that, Senator Yoakum talked about a little bit about a process. We've got to look at medical, we've got to look at decriminalizing, we got to look at CBD oil, we have a long way to go But as Representative Eisenhart points out, that public opinion has changed on a dime in so many places in our country, and the implications are not just economic, but they're racial justice implications. There are criminal justice implications. And we do no one any good by simply dismissing this subject or running away from it. So thank you for whoever asked that question. And certainly I will find my way into conversations at the Capitol and hope you join us.
Great question. I'll also say, you know, the chamber, I don't think we've really seriously looked into what, you know, the legalization of marijuana would mean, but I do think that from an economic standpoint, there is a lot of opportunity for new industry growth things there. So certainly lots more to come in decades, I'm sure, ahead. So so our last question is going to come from Molly, President and CEO of the Chamber. So Molly, if you want to go ahead.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Thank you all so much for being here today. I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to acknowledge public office certainly is no cakewalk, even in the best of times, let alone this unprecedented global pandemic. So thank you so much for your leadership, for your service, for your dedication to the community. Said this before, we all want the same thing at the end. We all want a prosperous Iowa where everyone can thrive and businesses can grow and we can have a great quality of life. We might not always agree about the best method to get there, but we all want the same thing in return. So I'm so grateful to all of you for your leadership, your dedication, and your support. In closing, with the obvious being wanting in 2021, obviously to get past COVID. 2021, I believe, is the comeback from COVID. And what that looks like and when we're able to do that, I know is a question mark, but and looking forward, if you could all offer in closing, there's a lot to look forward to in 21. We have Simmons opening. We have a baseball game that's going to happen at the Field of Dreams. There are lots of things that we're hopeful for and can be thankful for. If each of you could share in looking at 2021, either currently or looking forward, what project, economic or community development project or initiative are you most looking forward to?
That's a toughie.
Yeah, there's so many. So just off the top of my head, I'm just going to say I'm hoping this state can deal with the child care issue. I know that that has had a tremendous impact on families and on businesses, and we have a tremendous need for quality, affordable child care in Iowa. And I would hope that when we close out this session that we have dealt with that issue to make sure that our kiddos are well cared for, our families can continue to work, and our businesses can reopen.
I would throw out there that
Happy New Year, everybody. I hope it is joyful, healthy 2021 to all of you.
I agree with Senator Kelker. I've also been pleased and have been a participant myself in consuming our outdoor natural and recreational resources. And I look forward to that trend continuing into the future, you know, as hopefully the pandemic recedes. And I think it's a major portion of our quality of life attraction asset particularly in the driftless area of Iowa, but it's also a tremendous investment in mental health. And I think a lot of folks have felt they've experienced that, and it's helped them get through the last 9 months. We have a county conservation board that's put forth a very aggressive master plan for Dubuque County. And I think whether or not the state and federal government are quick to come to the table with resources, I look forward to having discussions with other local stakeholders about how we can continue to invest in our own community, perhaps using more of our own resources. One of my favorite lines from Rick Dickinson going way back to the 1980s is that there's going to be no knights in shining armor coming to our rescue. And therefore, let's stop waiting for that horse to arrive in from the sunset. So I think What we can do is start working together among those on this call and with other stakeholders in the community to come to our own rescue and move into our own future. And that's one area I'm ready, willing, and able to go.
Well, I too look forward to recovering and rising. We've got a lot of great people in a lot of great places in Iowa, and we're gonna have to put some tools in the toolbox to do that. But I know us Iowans are hardworking people, and we will get that done. So Happy New Year to all of you. I know I was a strong voice in saying we need to get at the Capitol. We are the people. We were elected to go and represent our districts and go down there and vote and make Iowa a bigger and better place. And so we've got a lot of that ahead of us, and I look forward to doing more than just COVID down there, and look forward to being down there in session next week with our statewide lawmakers. So thank you.
I want to know for the record, does Representative Eisenhart get extra points for quoting Rick Dickinson? Is he on this call? Is he out?
On the call.
I would have to say, to answer this question, Molly, I think it's a good question to end on. Thank you. There are a lot of things to celebrate. There's so many things to celebrate in the city of Dubuque, but one of the things that I am most excited about is the emerging Black business leaders. Black-owned businesses are popping up in Dubuque, and I'm actually having some conversations and thinking about some legislation specifically to help, get more of that happening in Dubuque. So, and I know our chamber is supporting those efforts as well. So excited in 2021 to see how all of those shape up and how we can, as all of us legislators on this call, come around those small business owners, those Black-owned businesses, and really cheer them on. So thank you. Happy New Year.
Wonderful. So thank you so much to everyone that's on the call today. Thank you to our legislators, Senator Yoakum, Senator Kolker, Representative James, Representative Eisenhart, Representative Lundgren, who was here earlier, and Representative Bradley, who was unable to make it. Thank you so much for your service, your support for the chamber over the years, and we look forward to working with you down in Des Moines over the course of the year and session. And also thank you to our ultimate sponsors, Q Casino, Medical Associates Clinics and Plans, TH Media, and Midwest One Bank. Thank you, everyone, and have a great new year.